The starship Aurora Spire drifted quietly above the twin moons of Theros 5, a silver arrow against a sea of glowing stars. Inside the grand hall of the alien flagship, diplomats and nobles gathered around a long shining table, humans on one side, the royal court of Therosians on the other. It was a meeting meant for peace, trade, and understanding, but for one human, it was also very awkward. Ethan Cole, an engineer-turned-envoy, sat near the end of the table, fidgeting with his translator badge. He was never trained for diplomacy. He preferred machines to politics. But today, he was the only human who could fix the ship that brought the ambassadors here. And somehow he had ended up in the meeting itself. The Therosians were beautiful and intimidating. Their skin shimmered like living emeralds, their eyes glowing softly with golden light. They spoke in melodic tones that the translator barely kept up with. The princess among them, Silyara, sat straight, calm, and radiant. Her silver crown glowed as if catching the breath of nearby stars. Ethan tried to relax. He smiled, made a few small jokes with the humans beside him, but none of the aliens laughed. The silence in the hall was heavy. So, to break the tension, he leaned forward and said with a grin, "You'd make a good wife," aiming the words playfully toward the princess. The translator repeated the line in the Therosian tongue. The room froze. The music of conversation died instantly. Even the soft hum of the ship seemed to vanish. Every alien I turned toward him, glowing brighter. Ethan blinked, confused. He looked around, realizing no one was laughing. "It's a joke," he whispered to the man beside him. But before anyone could respond, Princess Silyara stood up. Her voice, soft yet commanding, filled the chamber. "I accept," she said. A ripple of sound passed through the hall. Gasps, whispers, the clatter of ceremonial staffs hitting the floor. The guards dropped to one knee. The older nobles bowed their heads. Ethan's mouth fell open. "Wait, what?" he stammered. No, I was just..." But the Therosian Prime Elder raised a hand for silence. "The vow has been spoken," the Elder said in solemn tone. "The words of union cannot be undone." Ethan felt his pulse race. Sweat formed on his neck. He looked at the translator again, wondering if the device had broken. "Did she just say she accepts my—" "Yes," the translator confirmed softly. "The princess has accepted your marriage proposal." Laughter died in his throat, replaced by dread and disbelief. Around him, humans exchanged horrified looks. One whispered, "Oh no, Ethan, what did you do?" The princess stepped closer. Her eyes reflected a strange warmth, not anger, not amusement, something deeper. "Among my people," she said, "to call someone a wife is to promise eternity. You have spoken it before the stars, and the stars have heard." Ethan tried to explain. "No, it was a joke. Humans, we say things lightly. It doesn't mean..." She tilted her head gently, studying him as though he were a curious new creature. "Humans speak lightly of love?" she asked. "That is dangerous." The elders began a chant, their hands raised in the air, glowing symbols forming between their fingers. The translator whispered, "They are sealing the vow." "Sealing what?" Ethan cried. No, don't seal anything." But the energy filled the room like mist, wrapping around him and the princess in soft golden light. It pulsed once, warm, alive, then faded, leaving silence. When it was over, the elder spoke again. "The bond is complete. The stars have blessed the union." Ethan's brain stopped. He just stood there, staring. The humans in the back whispered furiously into their communicators, trying to reach their command ship. The aliens, however, seemed content, calm, even joyous. Silyara turned toward him and smiled. "You are brave, human, to speak such words before my people," she said gently. "Do not fear. I will honor this bond." He managed a nervous laugh. "Oh great. Honored, sure. Yeah, totally honored." Later that night, in the quiet of his quarters aboard the Therosian vessel, Ethan replayed the moment over and over. How could one careless joke have turned into a royal marriage? He gazed out the window at the glowing twin moons, their light falling softly across his face. "I just called her my wife," he muttered under his breath. "And now I'm part of an alien wedding." Somewhere deep inside, a strange feeling stirred. Fear, yes, but also fascination. The princess's eyes had held something more than ritual, something human. He didn't know it yet, but that single joke would echo through the stars and change not only his life, but the bond between two entire worlds. Ethan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the princess's calm face saying, "I accept," again and again. His brain couldn't process what had happened. One sentence, one small joke, had turned into a royal marriage before half the galaxy. By morning, the ship was surrounded by a formation of Therosian guards, bright silver armor reflecting the twin suns. The human delegation had been ordered to remain aboard while the council decided what to do. Ethan was escorted through glowing corridors of living crystal, where the walls pulsed softly with light, as if watching him breathe. He was brought into a vast chamber, circular and filled with echoing voices. The Therosian Council of Elders sat upon floating thrones, their eyes glowing gold. Princess Cilara stood beside them, serene but firm. Ethan tried to speak first. "Look, there's been a mistake," he said. "Where I come from, calling someone a good wife is just a compliment, not a contract." The elder in the center leaned forward, his skin shining like marble. "Among our people," he said slowly, "words are sacred energy. To speak is to bind. To joke of union is to call upon the stars themselves. They heard you, human," and the vow was sealed. Ethan's heart sank. "So what you're saying is, I can't just say sorry and walk away." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the chamber. "To break a vow," said another elder, "is to break your soul. The punishment is exile beyond the veil." He blinked. "Exile?" he whispered. "As in space exile?" The princess stepped closer, her long emerald robes gliding softly across the floor. "You did not mean harm," she said, "and so no harm will come to you. But the law is clear. You are now bound as my chosen. You will remain under royal protection until the bond is understood by both our hearts." Ethan could only stare. "Wait, you're chosen? I'm not even sure how to pronounce your planet's name correctly." A few alien courtiers looked offended, but Cilara smiled faintly. "Then you will learn," she said, "and so will I." Over the next days, Ethan was given a chamber in the royal palace. It overlooked the glowing gardens of the Rose, where trees shimmered like glass and rivers flowed with liquid light. Strange creatures floated among the leaves, singing low harmonic tones that calmed his nerves. He spent his time trying to understand their customs, reading through digital tablets filled with endless laws and rituals. Everything on the Rose was bound by words. Promises had power, oaths could shape matter, and lies could destroy kingdoms. Cilara often visited him, sometimes bringing him rare fruits or holographic scrolls of her world's history. She spoke softly, curious about human ways. "Do all humans speak in jest when they speak of love?" she asked one evening. Ethan hesitated. "Not all, but some of us do," he replied. "We laugh to make things lighter, even when we feel heavy inside." She looked thoughtful, her golden eyes reflecting the stars outside. "Strange," she said. "You use laughter to hide meaning. We use words to reveal it." Their conversations grew longer, and slowly, the space between them felt less like distance and more like curiosity. Still, he knew many around her court resented him. He could see it in their eyes, cold, judging, waiting for him to fail. One night, as he walked the balcony, a whisper echoed from the shadows. "You do not belong here, human," said a tall Therosian noble cloaked in silver. "Our princess is bound by law, but you are bound by mistake. Leave while you can." Ethan stood firm. "I didn't choose this, but I'm not running from it either," he said. "If I made this mess, I'll face it." The noble vanished back into the darkness, leaving only the soft hum of alien stars. Later, Cilara found him still standing there. "You were threatened," she said quietly, reading the tension on his face. He nodded. "Yeah, but I've handled worse." She stepped closer. "Your courage is loud, human, even when you whisper," she said. "That is why the stars listen to you." For the first time, Ethan smiled without fear. "Maybe the stars need to stop listening so much," he joked. Cilara laughed, a sound like glass wind chimes under moonlight. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and it felt human. In that moment, under the glowing skies of the Rose, Ethan realized something strange. The more he tried to undo the vow, the more his heart wanted to understand it. Maybe, just maybe, this accident wasn't a curse, but the start of something neither species could have predicted. And far beyond the palace walls, unseen eyes watched their growing connection, plotting in silence, because not everyone in the galaxy was ready for a love born from a joke that reached the stars. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan Cole's life on the Rose slowly began to change. The palace that once felt like a prison now felt like a living dream. Its walls shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting sunlight that passed through clouds made of golden mist. Every corridor sang with faint echoes, as if the building itself remembered every word spoken within it. Soyara walked beside him often, guiding him through the vast halls where floating lanterns drifted in slow orbits. "The Palace of Echoes," she said softly, "records every promise ever made within its walls. It keeps our history alive." Ethan smiled weakly. "So my little joke is recorded forever, huh?" The princess nodded. "Yes," she said, with a small smile. "Your voice is part of the palace now." He groaned playfully. "Great. Now I can't even take it back." Soyara's laughter echoed through the hall, soft and melodic, but behind the music of her laughter, there was something deeper, curiosity, maybe even affection. As days passed, Ethan began to notice how Therosian life was built entirely on harmony. Every sound, every word, every tone carried meaning. When the servants spoke, the air vibrated with colors. When Soyara sang during royal ceremonies, the very light around her shimmered. It was beautiful, but also overwhelming. Despite the peace, Ethan could feel tension in the air. The nobles bowed to him in public, but whispered behind his back. He often caught fragments of their conversations. Words like outsider, unworthy, impure. One evening, he wandered into a section of the palace rarely visited, a vast hall filled with tall mirrors that shimmered like still water. When he stepped inside, his reflection didn't mimic his movement. Instead, it spoke in Soyara's voice. "Why do you doubt yourself, human?" He froze. "What?" The reflection changed, showing him and the princess standing together beneath the twin moons. It was a vision, a possible future. He stepped back, his heart racing. "The Palace of Echoes reveals truth to those who listen," came Soyara's voice from behind him. She had followed him quietly. "It does not lie. It only shows what could be." He turned to face her. "So it's showing me us? Together?" She met his gaze, calm and steady. "Perhaps it sees what we cannot yet understand." Her words lingered like music in the air, and Ethan felt something stir inside him. The line between accident and fate was blurring fast. But not everyone was happy. The Therosian Council grew restless. Rumors spread that Soyara was being manipulated by human charm. Some believed the bond was a threat to their traditions. Others feared it would weaken her claim to the throne. In the shadows, nobles whispered plans of separation, plots to end the union before it rooted too deeply. Ethan, unaware of the full danger, tried to focus on learning. He trained in Therosian customs, studied their gestures, and even began to speak their language fluently. Soyara seemed proud. "You learn fast," she said one night on the balcony. "Even our children take years to master the tones." "Guess I'm motivated," he replied with a grin. She tilted her head. "By fear or by feeling?" He hesitated. "Maybe both." The silence between them was soft, warm, and filled with questions neither dared to ask aloud. But just as they began to grow closer, the peace shattered. Late one evening, a tremor shook the palace. The air turned cold, and the walls began to hum. Guards rushed through the corridors as alarms pulsed in blue light. An explosion echoed from the east wing. Smoke filled the air. Ethan ran toward the noise without thinking. He found shattered crystal walls and fallen guards. In the distance, a figure cloaked in silver fled through the broken arches. Soyara arrived moments later, her eyes glowing with fury. "The council chamber was attacked," she said. "Someone tried to destroy the sacred archives." Ethan clenched his fists. "Someone wants to erase the bond," he said quietly. The princess looked at him with a strange expression, a mix of fear and admiration. "They do not understand," she whispered, "that once the stars have witnessed something, it cannot be undone." Outside, lightning cracked across the twin moons, and the Palace of Echoes trembled again, as if warning them both that the real battle was only beginning. The next morning, the palace was silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy kind that follows fear. The explosion had left scars in the crystal halls, and whispers now moved faster than light. Some said the humans had brought misfortune. Others claimed it was the will of the stars testing their queen-to-be. Ethan stood before the Therosian Council once more, this time without the comfort of laughter or hope. The elders stared at him with cold golden eyes. "The bond between you and Princess Silyara has caused unrest," said the eldest among them. "To restore balance, you must prove your honor. You will face the trial of truth and courage, the ancient test of worth." Ethan frowned. "And if I refuse?" The hall darkened. "Then the vow is broken," the elder replied, "and both your fates will be sealed in exile." He glanced at Silyara, who stood silent but tense. Her eyes begged him not to give in to fear. Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll face your trial." That night, the palace transformed. The glowing corridors dimmed, replaced by pathways lit in deep blue light. The trial of honor was held in the Cavern of Echoes, a vast underground temple where sound itself carried truth. Silyara met him at the entrance. "Once you enter," she whispered, "the temple will test your heart. It will show your truth and your fear, not through strength, but through meaning." He smiled nervously. "So, no laser guns or sword fights?" She shook her head. "No, only your voice." He stepped inside. The doors closed behind him, sealing him in darkness. The cavern breathed, alive with strange whispers. Light pulsed faintly from glowing stones along the walls. Ethan walked forward until a reflection appeared in front of him. His own face, but older, colder, angry. "Why did you come here, human?" the echo asked. "For glory? For power? Or because you couldn't keep your mouth shut?" Ethan stared, his heart pounding. "Because it was a mistake," he said quietly, "but I won't let it destroy her world." The echo smiled cruelly. "Mistake or not, she will pay for it. You are a spark in her empire, and sparks burn." He clenched his fists. "Then I'll burn with it before I let anyone hurt her." The chamber shook, light flashing through the stone. A low hum filled the air as another figure appeared. Silyara herself. But her image was crying. "Why did you make that joke, Ethan?" she whispered. "Do you know what it cost me?" He reached for her, his hand passing through the illusion. "I didn't know," he said. "But I'll make it mean something now, I promise." The walls flared in golden light. The air filled with 1,000 voices chanting his name. The illusions faded, and a deep calm spread through the cavern. Outside, the council watched through the crystal walls of the chamber. The light that surrounded Ethan shifted from blue to white. "The color of truth," the elders murmured. "He speaks from the core. He is no deceiver." When the doors opened, Ethan stumbled out, exhausted, but alive. Silyara rushed forward, her composure breaking as she caught him before he fell. Her hands trembled against his shoulders. "You did it," she whispered. "The temple accepted you." He laughed weakly. "Good, because I really didn't have a plan B." The council bowed their heads. The elder spoke again. "The trial of honor has spoken. The human stands worthy of his vow." For the first time, the court knelt to him, not as an intruder, but as a chosen equal. The tension that had held the palace in fear began to fade, replaced by awe and reluctant respect. Later, as night fell, Silyara stood beside him on the balcony, watching the stars ripple across the horizon. "You faced your truth," she said softly. And the stars answered, "Do you still think your words were only a joke?" He looked at her, the moons reflecting in her golden eyes. "No," he said quietly, "not anymore." And for the first time since the day he spoke those fateful words, Ethan felt peace. But somewhere in the deep halls of the palace, shadows still whispered, plotting in silence, because not everyone believed that the stars had chosen wisely. Peace returned to the palace for only a few short days. The trial of honor had silenced the council, but not their doubts. In hidden chambers, envy still lived, whispered through marble halls where light could not reach. Ethan had earned respect, but he had also earned enemies. To many, he was a symbol of disruption, a human who had bent sacred law and survived. To others, he was proof that prophecy was real, that a stranger from another world would change the fate of the Rose forever. Silyara knew the danger. She ordered guards to watch over Ethan's quarters, but even loyalty could be bought. and shadows moved freely in the quiet hours between twin moon nights. One evening, Ethan joined Silyara on the observation terrace. The stars shimmered like living jewels, and the city below glowed in spirals of blue and gold. "Hard to believe all of this almost ended because of a bad joke," he said softly. She smiled. "Some jokes awaken destiny," she replied. "Others awaken fear." Before he could answer, a sudden vibration shook the terrace, a distant rumble echoing from the outer walls. Guards shouted below. Blue flames rose near the eastern tower. The alarm bells began to ring. Silyara turned sharply. "The archives," she whispered. "They are attacking again." Ethan grabbed her arm. "Who would attack the archives?" They hold the original vows," she said, her voice trembling. "If they destroy them, the bond will be erased." Without hesitation, Ethan ran toward the lower corridors. The marble floors shook beneath his boots. Smoke curled from the distant hallways as he passed fallen guards and shattered crystal doors. In the center of the archive chamber, cloaked figures surrounded a glowing pillar of light. Inside the pillar, golden threads of energy danced, the written record of his vow. Ethan shouted, "Stop!" and charged forward. The intruders turned, their faces hidden behind silver masks. One of them drew a weapon shaped like a blade of light. He ducked just in time, grabbing a broken metal rod from the floor. The fight was brutal and fast. The masked figures moved like trained assassins, but Ethan fought with desperation, not skill. Sparks lit the air as steel met energy, and echoes of power filled the room. Silyara arrived moments later, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough," she commanded, her hands lifted, glowing with radiant energy. The light from her palms exploded into golden waves that threw the attackers backward. The leader tried to flee, but Ethan caught his cloak and tore it away, revealing the face beneath. Lord Ethron, a high member of the council. Silyara froze, betrayal written across her face. "You," she whispered. Ethron sneered. "You've doomed us all. Princess, the stars chose wrongly. The human is a curse upon the Rose." Ethan stepped forward, bruised and breathless. "A curse who just saved your sacred archives," he snapped. The guards rushed in, surrounding the traitor. The elder lowered his head in shame, but said nothing more. The silence that followed was heavier than the smoke that hung in the air. When the dust settled, Silyara turned to Ethan, her eyes soft but filled with conflict. "You could have died," she said. "Why didn't you wait for help?" He laughed quietly. "Because I started this mess, remember? And maybe, just maybe, it's my job to protect what it created." Her expression softened. "You speak like a Therosian now." He smiled faintly. "Guess I've been hanging around one too long." Later that night, as the fires were put out and the traitors imprisoned, the two of them stood beneath the starlit dome. The light from the twin moons bathed them in silver, and Silyara reached out to take his hand. "Your world must think of words as air," she said softly. "But here, words build everything we are. You have given your words new meaning." Ethan looked at her hand, warm and trembling in his. "Then let's give them a new beginning too." She nodded, her eyes glimmering like dawn. "Together," she whispered. Far above them, the stars burned brighter, as if the galaxy itself listened to the vow forming between two hearts. But deep in the void beyond the Rose, something ancient stirred, a darkness older than the empire itself. It had heard the vow too, and it was not pleased. The palace was quiet again, but this time, it was not peace that lingered in the air. It was tension. The failed attack had shaken the empire. The Therosians were divided between those who believed in Ethan's sincerity and those who saw him as a dangerous symbol. For 3 days, the council remained in session, debating his fate. The traitors had been imprisoned, but their words still echoed. The stars chose wrongly, they had said. Now, even the elders were uncertain. Silyara stood before the council, her posture regal, her voice unwavering. "You question the will of the stars," she said. "Yet it was this human who defended our sacred vows. He faced your trial, saved your archives, and still you doubt." An elder replied coldly, "We doubt because he is not one of us. The stars may have heard him, but they were deceived by chance." Ethan, who had been standing silently behind her, stepped forward. "Then let me speak for myself," he said. His voice was steady, his eyes firm. I didn't come here to deceive anyone. I came here by accident, by humor, by mistake maybe. But every day since then, I've tried to honor what I said, even if I never meant it at first." The chamber fell silent. The golden walls reflected his image 100 times. He continued, "Humans make jokes to survive fear. We laugh to breathe, to live, to make pain smaller. But when we make a promise, we mean it. And I'm not leaving her, not because of law, but because of choice." The words rippled through the hall like thunder. Even the translators hesitated, unsure if the raw emotion could be captured in their language. Silyara turned to him, her eyes glimmering with quiet pride. The council murmured among themselves, ancient wisdom and prejudice colliding in their thoughts. Then, the eldest among them, the same who had declared the vow binding, rose slowly. "You speak as if your heart commands the stars," he said, "and yet the stars listen." He turned toward the others. "We cannot deny what has been proven. The human has spoken truth not with power, but with spirit." Ethan bowed his head slightly, unsure if he had won or lost. The elder continued, "But the law of the Rose must be witnessed one last time. The bond must be affirmed before the eye of eternity. If your words are true, it will know." Silyara's expression darkened. "That ritual hasn't been done for centuries," she said. "No one has faced the eye and survived unchanged." Ethan's voice was calm. "Then I'll face it. I've come this far because of my words. I'll end it with them too." The next night, the royal guards escorted them to the ancient observatory at the edge of the city. The structure was older than the palace itself, built from black stone and filled with floating rings of light. In the center hovered a sphere of radiant energy, the eye of eternity. It pulsed gently, like a living star trapped between worlds. Silyara touched his arm, her voice trembling. "Once you speak before it, it will see everything, every lie, every truth, every hidden thought." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let it see me as I am." He stepped forward, the air thick with light. The eye began to glow brighter, beams of gold and silver swirling around him. Then, a voice filled the chamber, deep, ancient, echoing through every mind present. "Human," it said, "you bound yourself to the daughter of stars with jest. Speak now, and the cosmos shall judge your heart." Ethan closed his eyes. "I spoke without thinking," he said, "but I stayed because I meant what came after. I stayed because she saw something in me when no one else did. If that's not truth, then let me be unmade." The eye shone like a sun, bathing the entire room in blinding light. Everyone shielded their faces. When the light faded, Ethan still stood, breathing, alive, but changed. A faint golden mark glowed on his chest. The mark of unity, a symbol unseen for millennia. The council knelt, whispering in disbelief. "The eye has accepted him," they said. "The vow is eternal." Silyara approached him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You spoke truth, and the stars listened." Ethan smiled, tired but peaceful. "Guess they finally stopped laughing at my jokes." Outside, the moons rose high, casting silver light over the empire. The people of the Rose gathered in the plazas, watching as the mark upon the human's chest glowed against the sky. For the first time in history, the stars of the Rose shimmered in two colors, gold and blue, the sign of a bond between worlds. But in the distance, beyond the edge of known space, a shadow moved, silent, vast, and waiting. For every light that rises, there is something that hungers to put it out. The night after the eye of eternity accepted him, the Rose was alive with light. The sky shimmered with golden waves, and songs rose from every corner of the empire. For the first time in centuries, humans and Therosians stood side by side, watching the same sky, bound by the same vow. Ethan stood on the highest balcony of the palace, looking at the endless stars. The mark on his chest still glowed softly, pulsing like a heartbeat that connected him to something larger. Silyara joined him quietly, her gown reflecting the twin moons like liquid silver. "You changed us," she said softly. "All of the Rose speaks your name now." He smiled faintly. "Guess that means I can finally ask for a day off." She laughed, the sound carrying through the open air like wind chimes. "If you take a day off, the stars might stop shining." They stood together in silence for a moment, letting the beauty of the night settle around them. Yet behind the peace, Ethan felt a strange pull, a whisper from the far edges of his thoughts, something old, something dark, calling through the light. The next morning, the council summoned them to the grand hall. The elders bowed before them both. "The vow has been witnessed by the stars," said the eldest. "Your bond has reshaped our destiny. But such unity also awakens what was once asleep." Scifi frowned. "You speak of the shadow." The elder nodded slowly. "The force that once tried to silence the stars, it feeds on division and fear. It now stirs again." Ethan glanced at her. "Then we face it together." And so began the final ceremony. The royal court gathered under the open sky, thousands of beings glowing in bioluminescent colors. The priests chanted words that carried through the air like music. The mark of unity on Ethan's chest brightened, responding to the same energy that flowed from Scifi's crown. "The stars witnessed the jest," the elder proclaimed, "and turned it into truth. Tonight, they witness truth and turn it into forever." Scifi took Ethan's hands in hers, her voice trembling but steady. "Before my people, before the cosmos, I bind my heart to yours, not by law, not by accident, but by choice." Ethan smiled, his eyes glimmering in the starlight. "I once called you my wife as a joke," he said, "but now I say it as the truest thing I've ever meant." A radiant light burst from between their joined hands, spreading outward like dawn breaking across the galaxy. Every Therosian fell to their knees as the stars above flickered and shifted, forming a spiral of gold and blue, the sign of eternal balance. The darkness that had been stirring beyond their world let out a single pulse of resistance, then dissolved into silence. For a moment, even the universe seemed to hold its breath. When the light faded, Ethan and Scifi stood at the center of the great circle, surrounded by shimmering air and the whispers of ancient power. The elder spoke softly. "So it is done. The human's words have become the law of stars, and the princess's heart has become its light." Ethan turned to Scifi. "So what happens now?" She smiled. "Now, we live, and let the galaxy learn what laughter can build." They looked up at the sky together, and for the first time, the stars seemed closer, as if they, too, were listening. Later that night, when the celebrations had quieted and the palace was still, Ethan sat alone for a moment, staring out the window. The journey had begun with a joke, a careless line spoken to break the silence. Now it had become a legend. He heard soft footsteps and turned to see Scifi approaching. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling. "Just thinking how strange it is, one joke, and now we're rewriting the stars." She leaned beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then maybe," she whispered. The stars were waiting for someone to speak carelessly enough to tell the truth. He looked at her, his heart calm at last. "Then let's never stop speaking." Outside, the galaxies shimmered like a million silent witnesses, and the vow that began in laughter ended in light. And as the twin moons rose once more, their glow merged with the stars above, whispering across the universe. The human spoke in jest, but the stars took him seriously.